that's happening in this campaign, we learned, and Jason talked about it, is that Donald Trump is going to speak to an audience, an African-American audience, to talk about African-American issues. Angela Rye, you were the executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus. Outreach to these voters was something that I imagine you worked on quite a bit, with the Congressional Black Caucus right now. Does Donald Trump get credit for, at this point, going to Detroit to do this? I think you just mentioned something very key. You said at this point. Donald Trump has run a campaign that has been rooted in bigotry and racism throughout the duration. So whether we're talking about immigration and him softening a position, or originally wanting to put 11 million people on planes to get them out of here with criminal background or not, this is more of the same. Donald Trump does not have any real desire to tap into the needs and the actual desires and policy prescriptions that would help to strengthen the African-American community. He sees a gaping hole between a win to 270 electoral votes and where he is right now, not only with black people, but also with brown voters. Something interesting happened this weekend that didn't have anything to do with the campaign per se, but Colin Kaepernick, and we're going to talk about what Colin Kaepernick didn't stand up for the national anthem in our next segment. But in the process of being interviewed, he did say he had great criticism for Donald Trump, but he also noted, Errol, that Hillary Clinton had used the word super predator in the 1990s. This is an African-American athlete who was very concerned about the fact that Hillary Clinton used that word. It's been the subject now of a Donald Trump video. I'm wondering if his discussion over the last 10 days has helped put that back into the national dialogue. Well, it will. Every time you bring it up, there are some people, many of them were Bernie Sanders supporters, who really bristled and really objected to the actions that she took and her advocacy for the 1994 crime control bill and the use of the term super predators, which, not to go too deep into the weeds, but it was a reference to what was feared at the time, which was that if you extrapolated what was happening with kids, with so-called crack babies, kids who were born addicted and so forth, and the rising crime rates that were going on at the same time, people thought if that goes on an uninterrupted trajectory, we're going to have complete mayhem. And that's where that phrase super predators came from. It didn't work out that way. It was discredited. She has backed away from it and so forth. But anytime you bring it up, there are some people who will really, really bristle and try and tie that around her neck. That is entirely fair. If you want her to apologize for it or backtrack from it 10 times, you can ask her 10 times, and that's what you'll get.
I think in regard to the outreach to the African-American community, I think it's good that he is finally going actually to the African-American community. But I think at this stage, if we minimize the conversation to what he said or she said in years past or in weeks past or months past, we take away from the real issue here is what can the two of them do for the African-American community moving forward? Who has the policies that will help them economically, with education, with health care? And I firmly believe that Donald Trump's policies will be more beneficial to the African-American community. It's a way of how he articulates that is the question. I think he can also incorporate some of Jack Kemp's policies of empowerment, providing ladder to opportunity for them to lift themselves up out of their situation. He needs to work on the tone in which he can. So that's part of the problem. So the fact that African Americans are talked about as monolithic entities is, we all need to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps when we were barefoot on plantations building this country for free is highly problematic to me. John, it's not about us needing to all be lifted out of poverty. I'm not impoverished, and I have several middle-class friends who are doing very well in this country, and so I reject the notion that we constantly need to be talking about. I'm just saying that particular point strikes a chord with me, and your candidate more often than not goes to that refrain, and it's highly problematic. So I'm cautioning you all in your black outreach to get some other folks who won't just go to what's on TV, what's in the evening news.
I'm not sure why facts are talked about as problematic. It is a fact, and a very unfortunate one, unfortunate one that, and this Donald Trump's articulated this, that someone who looks like me, makes on average $142,000, but someone who is of African American heritage, they make just $11,000. That's their net wealth. That's a problematic figure. It's problematic to me that an African American male is 6 to 8 times more likely to be killed than a white person. These are facts, and Donald Trump addressing them and trying to reach out. It's not, Kayleigh, talking down to an entire race. What he is doing is saying, there are people in the inner cities, and I want to reach out to them because I care about them and I want to help.
So that's actually not true. We know what Donald Trump has done to people in the inner cities for years. So while you might not want to talk about
what's happened in the past. You have to look at the past to figure out where people are going to go in the future. And so I think that we would be remiss if we ignored the housing discrimination cases, which there was a tremendous expose in the New York Times this weekend. If we ignored what happened with the Central Park Five, none of the surrogates want to address the fact that he's never apologized to these people. And in fact, in 2013, got damned right about his position again.
Right, and we can talk about Robert Byrd with Hillary Clinton.
No, but we can't. We can't because Robert Byrd actually apologized for and requested funding for the MLK Memorial.
Don't calling him or mentioning.
She doesn't have to. I think that you can. If Donald Trump wants to turn from his racist past,
this is what happens. You guys yell over when you try to share facts.
I was in the middle of my sentence. You cut me off a long time ago.
Bill Clinton kept the Confederate star in Arkansas. These are facts. They're inconvenient for you guys, but I agree with that.
I don't mind talking about. I don't mind talking about inconvenient truth.
Who are you guys here?
For the Clinton team, because here I don't want to. I agree.
I'm just a black Democrat who disagrees with racism.
I agree with Alice that I'd rather talk about issues, but when you have the VP coming out and saying Donald Trump, purveys KKK values, when we could do the same to your candidate, we can talk about Robert Byrd, we can talk about the star in the Arkansas
because
flag.
Robert Byrd actually had so you guys like to talk about black staffers. Robert Byrd had black staffers. He apologized for his participation in the KKK. He requested
after decades of participation.
I agree, it's horrible. I agree, it's horrible.
Yeah.
He requested funding for the MLK Memorial. I don't know what Donald Trump has done in that degree, but we can go on and on about comparisons to a David Duke struggling to disavow the KKK and David Duke.
Right.
We can talk about his father being involved in a KKK rally. No, it doesn't, but it also doesn't help to lie, Kayleigh.
Saturday, Donald Trump will give this speech, he'll give this interview in Detroit, so it gives us 5 days to talk about this a lot more, and we have an election in November to talk about this a lot more. Guys, come back. I do appreciate it. All right, coming up for us, a star NFL quarterback defends